Okay guys, today I'm going to be making a delicious seafood chowder, and this would be a tutorial. I have Alaskan king crab, I have clams, mussels, lobster, shrimp, and snow crab. Now, I'm using lobster. You really probably don't want to use lobster in this stew. Scallops is much better. I didn't have any scallops, so I'm replacing it with lobster. But you don't want to use lobster because even if you cook it right, it is going to be a little bit tougher than the rest of the seafood. So I don't recommend using it. So the first thing we're going to do is I've par cooked the mussels and the clams. The crab is already cooked, but any chance that you can get seafood in shells, because we're going to use the shells to create the stock, you want to get raw in shells, okay? When you get crab, it's going to be cooked, okay? So I've par cooked these just enough to be able to open and shuck. So I'm going to shuck this and I'll be right back. Okay, so I do want to mention that I have about 2 pounds of each type of seafood. That seems like a lot, but it's mostly shell. So for instance, I have shucked all of my mussels and clams, which means I remove the meat, and this is what 2 pounds renders. It's not very much. Then you want to take all of your shells and you want to dump them in your pot. The more shells you have in your pot, the tastier your stew is going to be. Plus, I like my stew chock full of seafood and my guests are never disappointed. You can certainly scale back and cut that in half and make a smaller pot. That's up to you. I realize seafood is expensive. I'm going to go ahead and shuck the rest of the seafood and I'll be right back. I'm back. I shucked, which means I removed all of the meat from that wonderful seafood. I've placed all the shells in this big pot. This is the nectar of your entire stew. It is what we call the liquor from shucking all of the seafood. You want to shuck it over a bowl, and this is the liquor. And you are going to want to put some of this into this to keep it moist and briny. And then you're going to cover this bowl and put it in the fridge while you are making your stock, okay? Then what we have here is I have chopped the bad part of the top of the celery, but it's so beautiful and leafy, and it's fine because this is for your stock. I've also washed it, and I've washed these carrots. These carrots still have the skin on. As long as you slice them in half, it's fine for the purpose of the stock. I also have cubed onion, and I have 2 cloves of garlic. I have some seafood stock, 1 bottle of clam juice. However, you should use 2. I only had 1, and I will be supplementing with water. So I'm going to go ahead and stuff all of these things in this pot. Okay. Throw in the garlic clove. We're going to throw in all of these carrots. Okay, and then we will toss in the onion. Okay, we'll throw in the last piece of garlic, and then what I will do is I will stir this up, and first we will add the clam juice. Okay, we will add 1 box of the seafood stock. Okay. And then I'm going to give this a little mix. I only have one hand. And then I'm going to add water to cover everything. Okay, I'll be right back. Okay, so that looks awesome. Now I'm going to take some of my liquor, which is the broth from shucking this seafood. I'm going to pour a little bit over my seafood, and the rest will go in this pot. Okay? Then I am going to add water, enough to get everything pretty well submerged. Sorry, I'm shaking. I just only have one hand. Okay, so that's pretty good. So we're going to start that boiling, and we're going to let that simmer for probably a couple hours. Okay, we're about a half an hour in, and I do want to mention that to start, you want to put the lid on the pot, turn it on high heat to a very vigorous boil, and then you will turn it down to medium heat so that it can simmer. So every half an hour, we want to stir the pot. This right here is a perfect simmer, okay? And you want to simmer it for about 2 hours, stirring every half an hour. And the reason we want to stir is to just get these flavors to meld, and also to make sure that nothing is sticking at the bottom. So, hi, Mr. Mussel. Okay, so this is what you do, and this is a perfect simmer. We're going to stick that lobster down in there. Okay. All right, we'll put on the top, and then we will continue to let that simmer for another hour and a half, again stirring every half hour. Okay, guys, so I lied. I would not simmer this for 2 hours. I would only simmer it for about an hour and a half. We are about an hour in. As you can see, the liquid has gone down. If that occurs and the liquid is going down too quickly, because you want to make sure you have enough broth for your soup, you want to turn your heat down a little bit, and you want to add one more bottle of clam juice or a little more seafood stock to replace what you believe has been evaporated. But if you add any liquid, you want that to be done the first hour, because you want it to have time to cook. The last half hour, nothing should be added. You want that to reduce down, because that's what gives you your flavor. Anytime you add something that hasn't been cooking, it must continue to cook to regain its full flavor. Okay, so at this point, it's gone down. I went and I got another bottle of clam juice. I'm going to add that. And then I'm going to let this go another half an hour, and then we're going to strain it. Okay, so there you have it. So I've added a little bit more seafood stock and a little bit more clam juice. We're an hour in, and I am going to add some of this natural sea salt. Okay, I've tasted the broth. It's not too salty. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add a little bit of that sea salt. I would say a tablespoon or two. I'm going to add some black pepper. I would say maybe a teaspoon or so. And then I am going to add some, just a little bit of red chili flakes. Just a little bit. Okay? So I'm going to get this back up to a simmer for the last half hour. It's looking amazing. And then I'm going to strain it. And that's when it gets fun. That's when the chowder will come all together. And we'll see the final product in a little bit. Okay, here we are. The stock is done. It's reduced down. We've added our spices to it. And it's been about an hour and a half. So you want to get the biggest bowl that you can find that your strainer will fit into without being on top of it or overlapping it. Because trust me, folks, You do not want to lose an ounce of this incredible stock. Okay, it took a long time to get there. You don't want to waste any. So I'm going to go ahead and dump this, and I'll be right back. This is my beautiful broth. I have strained it twice, so it is absolutely particle free from any kind of shells. Now this is the pot that I used. You do not want to rinse your pot. You can pick out any undesirable particles, but this has been seasoned with delectable seafood flavor. So you want to just keep that pot as is. Now what we're going to do is we're going to gently saute these vegetables and potatoes. I have 2 cups of celery. I have coarse chopped carrot. And you want to chop it coarse because I want the star of the dish to be the seafood. If you do large chunks, it's a little too carroty and it takes away. So I just do these small, coarse chop. Then, this is a little trick of mine. I use simply potatoes with the onion in it. You do not want to chop onion and put it in your chowder. That's weird. This has onion flavor, but you won't taste the onion. And these are natural. They are the perfect consistency. And I overcook these because I want them to be the same tenderness as the seafood. I do not want any different kind of textures in my chowder. So we're going to go ahead. You want to use a half a stick of butter. This is a 1/4 stick, but you really want to use a half. This is all I've got. So I'm going to saute this down, and then I'm going to throw in my veggies. Okay, so your butter, you want to cook it down and make kind of a brown butter. You can start smelling a nutty flavor, and that's when it's time to start dumping these vegetables. So we're going to dump the celery. We're going to dump the carrot. We're going to hold off on the potatoes for a second. And then we're going to just sweat these out. Just sweat them out. Oh, there's a nice nutty smell coming. That's that brown butter. Okay, so now we're going to throw in our potatoes. And I have this on high heat for now, but I'll turn it down in a moment. I wish I had some more butter. It really makes a difference. But this will have to do. Okay. So I'm just going to get this kind of cooked through, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to add our broth, and we're going to reduce that broth down to about half to a quarter. The more you reduce this broth, the more flavorful this stew will be. And then don't worry about it getting too low, because once you add in all that seafood as well as some cream, it'll balance out on broth ratio to the items in your chowder. Okay? So I'll get that cooking and we'll add the broth and then we'll take it from there. Okay, so these are the potatoes that you want to use in your chowder. You can, peel your own and chop your own, but these have so much flavor. They're natural, and they're dynamite for the stew. Okay? So we want to be careful that we do not brown these vegetables. We just want to sweat them out. Okay? And they're about done. So my bowl here needs 2 hands. So these are done. They're kind of soft. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pour the broth in. We're going to put the lid on it. And we are going to reduce this broth down by half and see where we're at. So I've dumped my seafood broth in. It's got all that brown butter. It's got the flavor of onion. carrots, celery, and then everything that you put in that stock originally. So we're going to get this to a vigorous boil. Okay, so I got this stock to a vigorous boil, just like we did originally with the first batch of stock. And then I took it down to a very nice simmer. So we're just going to let this simmer down about half to a quart. Okay, so my broth has simmered down about half, a little under half. And I'm going to use, I shook these up really well. You want to make sure you get whipping cream, the real thick, heavy cream. I'm going to turn this up just a tad. And this right here is a trick, because you want to make sure that you boil it vigorously and stir constantly to get this to thicken, okay? So there it is. And I'm going to come over here, get my whisk. We're going to get this to a vigorous boil. Oh yeah, it's coming together. Now, we want to get this to a very, very vigorous boil. And don't worry about scorching your cream. As long as you're stirring it, you should be fine. But this should boil very, very hard. And you must constantly stir to get sort of a thickness to it, okay? So we're going to let that boil a minute, and then I'll show you what I mean. So now that this is at a vigorous boil, you're going to want to just stir, stir, stir. And you want to be careful not to crush your potatoes and your vegetables, right? You want to keep them intact, and they're very tender at this point. So you just keep vigorously stirring and stirring, okay? And we want to then let it go and keep going back and stirring and stirring. And we want to reduce this down until we see it getting kind of thick, okay? And the thickness we're looking for is thick enough so that when we throw in the seafood, it's going to have some liquor and it's going to expel some water, you know, natural water from itself. So we want it thick enough where it has integrity to be able to withstand that moisture without becoming like water. Okay, so again, you let it boil and then just keep going back, whisking to make sure it doesn't, you know, scorch the bottom. But that should really boil down, okay? Okay, so this is thickening up pretty nicely. Okay, it's about ready to take the seafood. It's about reduced by half. Now, here's my beautiful seafood. Most of this seafood is raw, okay? The clams and mussels are semi-cooked, but they're still raw. And the only thing that is cooked in here is the crab. So I am now going to turn off the heat, and we're going to dump this seafood, into the pot, okay? And I am going to gently stir it around, and look at that beautiful, beautiful stew, okay? So we are turning that off, and we'll just give it a stir so that all those wonderful liquids from the seafood get in there, okay? And then we are going to cover it and just let it sit, okay? That is so hot that that's going to cook that seafood. And next you will see the final product. Okay guys, the stew is ready. It's been sitting for about 10 minutes. So all of the seafood is absolutely cooked perfectly. We'll go ahead and serve it up. This is best served with crunchy French bread out of the oven. And this is a wonderful meal by itself. It's creamy, it's buttery, the seafood is amazing, and even when you reheat it in the microwave, the seafood will stay tender. I'm proud of this recipe because it's an original Aunt Bee's recipe, and it's one of my favorites. So I hope you've enjoyed this, and we'll catch you next time. Thank you.